The Avon Theater opened on November 28, 1916. It was elaborate and exquisitely decorated. In fact, it was one of the most expensively decorated movie picture houses in the entire country at that time, even rivaling the Twin. The decorations and artwork were all original pieces by a local artist named C.O. Knapp. It featured 7-foot-tall monuments on the outside posts and large statues of lions with lighted eyes on the inside. There is even a statue of a woman above the curtains holding a large wreath out towards the audience. And if that wasn't enough, the theater was circled entirely with busts of women's heads.
The decor was only part of what made the Avon special. The screen was the largest in the city, and workers spent hours whitewashing the wall to make the screen absolutely perfect. Everything, including the projector, the pipe organ, the orchestra, and the acoustics, were designed to give the audience as much of a flawless experience as possible. It wasn't surprising that the Avon quickly became known as the most beautiful theater in the Midwest. The Avon was also unique in that it was solely designed for moving pictures. At the time, it was considered to be a waste to build a theater for movies alone. Besides, movies were nothing more than a fad. Little did they know that in 2020, the Avon would still be thriving under its original purpose and design.
On its opening night, the audience was greeted by Dan Denon, Decatur's mayor, who stated that the theater was unquestionably the handsomest and largest in the state of Illinois. He also boasted that, thanks to new businesses like the Avon, Decatur would finally take its place in the ranks of real cities.
The Avon prospered for many years, but it would not hold on to its glory. The theater was extensively remodeled in the 1950s, taking on a mid-century modern decor and style. The Avon would never again see the elegance and the decadence of its early years. The theater saw sharp declines in business and revenue in the 1980s, and soon it was the last retro-style theater left in town. This was fueled by the development of new multiplex theaters which offered patrons more choices. In desperation, and as an effort to just keep the doors open, the theater converted to showing second-run movies in 1985. This was short-lived, and the Avon finally closed its doors for good in April 1986.
The theater remained empty for several years, and while there were attempts to resurrect it, they were all met with a general lack of enthusiasm from the community. There seemed to be no hope that the theater would ever open its doors again. That is, until 1999, when the theater underwent renovations and opened as an independent and art film theater. The Avon thrived under this new model as Decatur residents flowed back to the seats to experience alternative films and limited-release films that would have otherwise never seen audiences.
It seems, however, that restoring the old building didn't just stir up years of old dust, but perhaps a ghost or two. So who is believed to be haunting the building? One of its previous owners, of course. The theater stayed with the original owners until it was bought by Gus Constantinopoulos and family in 1927. Gus loved the theater and worked in his second-story office in the building. The Constantinopoulos family sold the Avon in 1966 to a large theater chain. Legend has it that Gus loved the theater so much that he refused to leave his office even after the theater was bought out. While this part of the story is probably fable, it is told that the new owners had to throw everything out of Gus's office and onto the street just to get him to leave. This may explain why Gus is believed to still be haunting the Avon today. He simply loved the theater and refused to leave.
The Avon did not become officially known for its ghostly activity until the mid-1990s. This was when prospective proprietor Skip Houston started having strange experiences. The theater had been sitting unused and Skip was evaluating the Avon for different proposed downtown projects. He visited the theater on a dark and rainy afternoon in 1995 to grab some marquee letters. Even though the theater was purported to be haunted, he wasn't concerned and had no qualms about entering the rundown building, even though there was no electricity. Armed with a flashlight and a couple of garbage bags to carry the letters, he entered the theater and found the letter room, which was on the upstairs level. There was a variety of letters from days gone by, and Skip spent several minutes sorting through these letters, using the flashlight as a guiding light. Not long into the search, Skip heard a noise in the hallway outside of the room. He investigated but found nothing there. A few minutes later, he heard what he thought were footsteps, but upon searching the hall, he again found nothing. Shaking it off, he went back to work, sorting and filling the bags with letters. Then, hearing the noise again, he quickly turned around to find a man standing in the doorway.
My first thought, he said, was that someone else was in the theater, perhaps a homeless person hiding out there. He was of medium height and slender build. His age appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s. His hair was close-cropped, gray, and black. He was not transparent or wraith-like. He appeared solid. His face was nondescript, and he stared into the room, not looking at me, just staring. I started to speak to him, and then he slowly turned and started down the hallway. Recovered from my surprise, I darted to the doorway to say something, but all that I saw was an empty hall. I grabbed the finished bag of letters and left the theater as fast as my legs would carry me.
The theater started undergoing renovations in 1998 in an effort to reopen it. Skip and his business partner Troy Taylor started giving haunted Decatur tours about this time and used the Avon as an investigation site on the tours. There was still no electricity in the building, and it was closed to the public due to the renovations. On this particular night, the outdoor events had been rained out, and the plan was to take the group to the Avon for an extended investigation to salvage the otherwise anticlimactic night. Weird things had happened before on these tours, but something happened that night that was more startling and strange than any other time. Perhaps it was the storm that night that added to the spooky ambience.
As Skip discussed the Avon's history and shared some of the haunted events with the group, he paused and asked if there were any questions. There was a hand raised, and someone asked about the name of the former owner, the so-called resident ghost. As soon as Skip said, Gus Constan, someone in the crowd shouted and pointed in the direction of the theater balcony, where a figure stood near the balcony rail. There were at least 15 people in the tour group that night, who all reported seeing the shadowy figure. The group panicked, and people pushed and shoved each other in the dark to get out of the auditorium and into the lobby. Once in the lobby, the group rushed to the exits only to find them locked. It was absolute pandemonium. Skip was probably not surprised when his assistant quit that night and never came back.
This wasn't Skip's last encounter with Gus. One time, he was sitting in the auditorium talking to someone when he saw a strange flash of light. He didn't worry about it, and he wrote it off as an optical illusion until it was brought to his attention by the person he was talking to. The other person described the light as having an outline of a figure, which confirmed exactly what Skip had seen. So was this Gus? Perhaps. Today, the Avon is operational and thriving. There are still occasional reports of apparitions and other supernatural events. In recent times, there have been sightings of a woman in a blue dress and what appears to be a uniformed man in costume from the 1930s.
Another common report involves what has been called the phantom audience. The theater has received nearly a dozen reports of patrons spotting shadowy forms sitting in theater seats. These apparitions appear to be watching whatever film is being shown. One patron reported seeing two distinct figures seated in the theater a short distance away from her.
I happened to glance forward and a little to my right during the movie, and I saw what looked like a young couple sitting in the seats, staring at the screen. They looked completely ordinary, but they were only there for a second. Then they were just gone.
All in all, nothing that haunts the Avon seems to be malicious, just spirits like Gus Constan who love the theater and refuse to leave.